I never thought I'd speak her name again. Not after the night she vanished, leaving nothing but a note scrawled in haste and the cold imprint of her body on my bed. Her name was Clara, my wife, my first and only love. 6 years have passed since she disappeared into the wild with some nameless drifter, and in all that time I've tried to scrape together the pieces of a life without her. I built fences, tended cattle, remarried a decent woman named Mary, and tried to convince myself that love was something you could bury under work. But the truth is, you never bury it. You just push it down, and every now and then it claws back up through the dirt like a ghost. It was winter when it happened. A cruel winter, the kind where the wind cuts like glass and the roads turn to frozen stone. That morning, the town was quiet, save for the groaning of wagons and the clop of horses struggling against the ice. I was heading back from the blacksmith when I saw her. At first, I thought my eyes were tricking me. She sat tall in the saddle, pale against the snow, her coat hanging loose as if she didn't feel the cold. And then I saw her face. Clara. She looked older, harsher, like the wilderness had stripped her down to bone and grit. But her eyes, those blue eyes I'd memorized on long summer nights, were unmistakable. My chest turned to stone. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. The world narrowed to the sound of her horse's hooves and the way her hair blew across her cheeks. And she wasn't alone. Riding beside her, clutching the saddle horn with tiny hands, was a boy. No more than 5, maybe 6. His hair was black as coal, messy as a crow's nest, but his face, God help me, his face was mine. The same sharp jaw, the same brow. The boy turned, and when his eyes met mine, it was like someone drove a nail straight through my chest. Mary's voice called from behind me, snapping the spell. Daniel? Who is that? I couldn't answer. My lips wouldn't move. All I could do was stare as Clara rode past, her gaze brushing over me like I was a stranger. She didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't offer a single word. She just kept riding, that boy clinging to her, their figures vanishing into the drifting snow like phantoms. And in that moment, I knew nothing about my life was as steady as I'd believed. The fences I'd built, the vows I'd spoken, the new life I'd carved, it all shook like glass in a storm. Because Clara was back, and she hadn't come alone. That night I couldn't sleep. Mary lay beside me, her breath slow and steady, but my eyes stayed wide open, fixed on the cracks in the ceiling. Every time I closed them, I saw Clara's face. I saw that boy, my boy. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was so desperate for answers I'd forced my features onto the child's face. But the truth doesn't bend that way. I knew what I saw, and the way Clara looked right through me, like I was a stranger, cut deeper than any knife. By morning, I was pacing the kitchen, fire dying in the stove, when Mary came in. She rubbed her eyes and tied her hair back, watching me like she'd been awake longer than she let on. You gonna tell me what that was yesterday? She asked. I swallowed hard. Just someone I used to know. Her silence weighed heavier than her words ever could. Mary's always been sharper than she looks. Quiet, steady, but she notices things. And she noticed the way my hands shook when I tried to sip my coffee. By noon I found myself riding into town again. I told Mary it was for supplies, but that was a lie. My gut pulled me toward answers, no matter how ugly they might be. I asked around quietly. At the saloon, a ranch hand swore he saw Clara head toward the boarding house near the edge of town. Another man said the boy had been asking about candy at the mercantile, his voice timid, like he wasn't used to people. Every word tightened the knot in my chest. I found myself standing outside that boarding house, boots planted in frozen mud, staring up at the warped shutters. My breath made clouds in the air. I wanted to walk away, to leave the ghosts buried. But my feet betrayed me. I climbed those steps and knocked. When the door cracked open, she was there. Clara. Her eyes widened just enough to show she hadn't expected me. Then she lowered her gaze. Daniel. Hearing my name in her voice after 6 years nearly split me in half. I wanted to grab her, to shake her, to ask 1,000 questions all at once. But I didn't. My throat felt stuffed with cotton. She stepped back, letting me inside. The room smelled of wood smoke and damp wool. And then I saw him. The boy sat on the floor, carving at a stick with a dull knife, his tongue pressed against his lip in concentration. When he looked up at me, I saw myself again, staring back like a cruel reflection. His name's Samuel, Clara said softly, almost like she was confessing. The boy set the stick down and climbed to his feet. He studied me, head tilted, as if he felt the same pull I did but didn't understand it. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a whisper. Is he mine? Clara's silence lasted only a second, but it felt like hours. And then she nodded. My knees nearly buckled. The boy was mine. My flesh. My blood. And for the first time in 6 years, I realized the life I thought I'd rebuilt was nothing more than a lie waiting to unravel. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding louder than the fire crackling in the stove. Samuel, my son, watched me like I was some outlaw who'd barged into his home. And Clara wouldn't meet my eyes. She just sat down in the chair by the window, her hands trembling as she laced her fingers together. I thought you were dead, I finally managed to say, my voice ragged. For 6 years, Clara. 6 damn years, I mourned you. She flinched like the words were a whip across her back. I know. Do you? Do you know what it's like to wake up every day wondering if she froze in a ditch or was dragged off by some bastard into the hills? Do you know what it's like to bury a woman who never even had a grave? Her eyes lifted, glistening but hard. Do you know what it's like to be trapped in a marriage where your heart feels caged? The words hit me like a bullet. I opened my mouth, then shut it again, staring at her in disbelief. My heart caged? I'd given her everything. Every acre, every drop of sweat, every piece of me. Before I could answer, Samuel walked over, curious. His small hand tugged at Clara's sleeve, and she bent down to him. Go wash up, she whispered, brushing his hair back. We'll eat soon. He gave me one last look before slipping into the back room, bare feet padding against the floorboards. The silence left behind was sharp. I finally spoke, each word heavy. Why'd you leave? Her jaw clenched. Because I couldn't breathe, Daniel. You had dreams of fences and cattle and building something steady, but me? I wanted the horizon. I wanted more than the same sunrise over the same damn pasture. That drifter, he promised me something different. Her voice cracked then, just barely, but she pushed on. And for a while, I believed him. I leaned forward, my fists tight. So you threw away everything for some no-name drifter? Clara's gaze snapped to mine, fierce. Don't you dare think it was that simple. He wasn't just some no-name. He was, she stopped, biting the words back. I felt my stomach twist. Who was he, Clara? She shook her head, looking away toward the frosted window. It doesn't matter now. He's gone. But I saw it. The flicker in her eyes. The way her hands shook when she said it. Whoever that man was, he wasn't just gone. He was still here, in the shadows of her heart. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag the truth out of her. But before I could speak again, the boy's laughter echoed from the back room. Light, warm, innocent. A sound that belonged to me as much as it did to him. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know who the enemy was. Clara, the drifter, or myself. I rode home that evening with the wind tearing at my coat and a storm building in my chest. The snow bit at my face, but none of it hurt half as much as Clara's words. She'd left because she couldn't breathe. She'd traded me for the promise of horizons, for a drifter who gave her something I never could. And now she was back, dragging my bloodline with her like some secret she'd hoped I'd never discover. When I walked through my own door, Mary was waiting. She had supper ready, stew steaming on the table, but one look at me and she knew I hadn't gone to town for supplies. Her eyes lingered on the set of my jaw, the frost still clinging to my beard. You saw her, she said flatly. I dropped into my chair, weary. Yes. And the boy. I couldn't meet her gaze. He's mine. The air in that little kitchen turned heavy as stone. Mary sat across from me, her spoon resting in her bowl, untouched. For years she'd been patient with me, living in the shadow of a woman I never fully let go. She deserved better than this. But what could I tell her? That everything we'd built together was balanced on lies I hadn't even known I was telling? Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. So what now, Daniel? You bringing them here? Gonna set another place at the table like nothing's changed? I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night, I dreamed of Samuel. He was standing in the middle of the pasture, fence posts leaning all around him, snow falling heavy on his small shoulders. He called out to me, but when I tried to move, my legs sank into the earth like it was mud. I woke drenched in sweat, Mary's side of the bed already cold. The next days blurred. Work lost its meaning. Every swing of the hammer, every bale of hay I lifted, my thoughts circled back to that boy's face. To Clara's words. to the way she hadn't told me the drifter's name. Then, on the third night, the truth started to slip out in town. I was at the saloon when two ranch hands started whispering near the bar. "You hear about that woman staying at the boarding house? Said she's been running from someone. Mean bastard, by the sound of it." "Yeah. Folks say he's been asking questions. About her. About the boy." The words hit me like a kick in the gut. Whoever Clara had run with, whoever Samuel's life had been tangled up with, he wasn't gone like she claimed. He was close. And he was looking. I slammed my glass down so hard the barkeep cursed, but I barely heard him. My boots carried me out into the night, my mind blazing with a single thought. If that man came to find her, to find Samuel, then this wasn't just Clara's mess anymore. It was mine. And God help me, I wasn't sure if I wanted to protect them or tear the truth out of her until she finally told me everything. The next morning, I saddled my horse before the sun even touched the ridge. My hands moved by habit, tightening straps, checking the cinch, but my mind was nowhere near the barn. It was back in that boarding house with Clara, with Samuel, with the truth still coiled like a rattler under a rock. I told myself I was going to town for answers, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. I needed to see him again. The boy, my boy. When I reached the boarding house, the windows were fogged with the warmth of breakfast cooking. I could hear laughter, Samuel's, clear and unbroken. That sound was a knife and a bomb all at once. I knocked, and Clara opened the door. For a moment, she looked like she might slam it shut, but instead she stepped aside. Samuel was sitting at the table, legs dangling, eating a biscuit too big for his hands. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "Howdy, mister," he said with a grin. My chest tightened. He didn't know, didn't have a clue who I was. "Morning," I muttered, removing my hat. "Mind if I sit?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. I sat across from Samuel, who was chattering about how he wanted to see the horses tied up out back. Clara tried to hush him, but I smiled despite myself. When she stepped away to fetch more coffee, Samuel leaned closer and whispered, "Are you a cowboy?" I couldn't help but chuckle. "I reckon I am." His eyes went wide. "Do you shoot bad men?" The question landed heavier than he knew. I opened my mouth, but Clara's voice cut in sharp. "Samuel, that's enough." She set the coffee down, her glare fixed on me like she was daring me to say one more word. We ate in silence after that, but I couldn't ignore the way Samuel's eyes kept darting to me, curious, hungry, like he saw something in me that no one had ever told him. When the meal ended, Clara walked me outside. The cold air stung, but her voice stung worse. "You can't keep coming here, Daniel." I squared my shoulders. "Why not? He's my son." Her face hardened. "He doesn't know that. And until I decide it's safe, he won't. Do you understand me?" I stared at her, anger bubbling. "Safe from who, Clara? From me? Or from the man you ran off with?" Her eyes flashed, and for the first time, she didn't look strong. She looked scared. "He's coming. And if he finds us, Daniel, he'll kill you. He'll kill all of us." Her words sent a chill through me colder than the wind itself. Because I knew then this wasn't just about Clara's choices. Whoever that man was, he was still out there. And he was closing in. The days that followed stretched taut as barbed wire. Every time a stranger rode into town, every time boots echoed on the boardwalk, I felt my hand drift toward the iron on my hip. Folks started to notice too. The way I kept scanning faces, the way I rode the streets twice before heading home. Rumors ran fast in a place like ours, but none of them cut as deep as the truth I carried alone. Mary saw the change. She didn't ask at first, just watched me like a hawk, her lips pressed thin at supper, her eyes tired. On the fourth night, she finally spoke. "This isn't about Clara anymore, is it?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. She set her fork down with a quiet clink. "Daniel, am I your wife? Or am I just someone filling a space she left behind?" Her words struck harder than any bullet. For years she'd stood by me, steady as stone, while I wrestled ghosts I never spoke of. And now those ghosts had come back wearing Clara's face and Samuel's smile. "I don't know," I whispered. It was the cruelest truth I'd ever spoken. That night I left before dawn, unable to sit in that house a moment longer. I rode hard toward the boarding house, frost biting at my hands, the cold air tearing my lungs raw. When I arrived, Clara was already awake, her shawl wrapped tight, her eyes ringed with sleepless nights. "He's closer," she said before I even asked. "A rider came yesterday." Said a man's been asking in every town between here and Dodge. Asking for a woman and a boy. My stomach sank. And you think he'll come here? She nodded, her hand trembling as it brushed Samuel's hair while he slept in the back room. He won't stop, Daniel. Not until he finds us. I stood there in the dim light, torn in two. On one side, Mary, the woman who had stood by me, who deserved better than this hell. On the other, Clara and Samuel, my blood, my son. And looming over all of it was the shadow of a man I'd never met, but who was already tearing my life apart. I grabbed Clara's arm, harder than I meant to. Who is he? Her eyes darted away, filling with something between shame and fear. Tell me. My voice was sharp enough to make Samuel stir in his sleep. Clara finally met my gaze. He was your brother's man. The one who rode with him after the war. You remember Jonas Pike? The name dropped like lead. Jonas Pike. A man I'd once fought beside, a man I'd trusted. If it was him hunting, then this wasn't just about Clara running. This was about betrayal that cut deeper than blood. The name Jonas Pike rattled around in my head like a loose bullet in a tin can. I hadn't thought about him in years. Not since the war, when he and my brother rode off together and never came back. I'd heard whispers afterward. Ambushes, killings, a string of robberies tied to his name. But I never knew the truth. Now here it was, staring me dead in the eye. Jonas Pike. The man Clara had run with. The man Samuel had called Pa, without knowing the blood that tied us. I rode home in a haze that evening, the world colder and smaller than it had ever felt. Mary was waiting, lantern burning in the window. She met me at the door, her arms crossed, jaw tight. Where have you been? I opened my mouth, then shut it. What could I say? That my past had come home to roost in the shape of a boy. That the man hunting us was once like kin to me? She didn't wait for an answer. I'm not blind, Daniel. You've been gone more than you've been here. And I see it. The way you look when his name is spoken. Samuel. He's yours, isn't he? The word caught in my throat, but I forced it out. Yes. Mary's face broke. Not with anger, but with something worse. Hurt so deep it hollowed her eyes. Then you go, she whispered. Go protect them. Do what you have to. But don't you dare walk back through this door unless you know who you are and who you belong to. I left her standing there in the lantern light, her tears shining like frost on her cheeks. The next morning, Clara and Samuel were gone. Their room at the boarding house was empty, bed cold, trunk missing. I stormed down to the keeper, who only shrugged. Left at first light. Didn't say where. Didn't have to. The boy was scared stiff. Woman too. My gut twisted. They hadn't run from me. They'd run from Jonas. I saddled my horse and followed the trail, fresh tracks heading west, toward the river crossings. Snow made the ride brutal, but I pushed on, the thought of Samuel's small boots in the cold driving me harder. By dusk, I spotted smoke on the horizon. As I drew closer, I saw them. Clara huddled by a weak fire, Samuel wrapped in her arms. Relief surged through me, until another shadow moved into the firelight. Tall, broad, a face I knew. Jonas Pike. He carried himself with the easy swagger of a man who feared nothing. When he spotted me, his grin spread slow, like a wolf sizing up its prey. Well, if it ain't Daniel Harper, he drawled. I was wondering when you'd show. My hand dropped to my revolver. Clara gasped, clutching Samuel tighter. And in that moment, I realized the truth. This wasn't about Clara anymore. It wasn't even about Samuel. It was about me and Jonas, and the reckoning we'd both been running from since the war. Jonas's grin never faltered as he stepped closer to the fire, his boots crunching against the snow. The years had carved him into something harder, meaner. His eyes were cold as stone, and when they fixed on me, it was like staring into the barrel of a loaded gun. You always were the righteous one, Jonas sneered. While the rest of us bled and starved, you kept your hands clean. Now look at you. Come all this way for a woman who never belonged to you. Clara stood, shielding Samuel behind her. Jonas, please, don't do this. He barely glanced at her. You think he cares for you? He only came because he couldn't stand the thought of me having what's his. My hand twitched over the revolver. That boy ain't yours, Jonas. And you know it. His laugh was sharp, bitter. No, but I raised him while you were busy playing rancher. He knows my voice, my rules. I'm the one who put food in his mouth. He stepped forward, his coat brushing the firelight, his hand hovering over his own gun. If you want him, you'll have to take him. The air between us stretched thin, tighter with every heartbeat. Clara whispered Samuel's name, her voice trembling, but I couldn't look away from Jonas. You betrayed my brother, I said, my voice low. You betrayed me. And now you're standing here, trying to claim what ain't yours. I can't let that stand. Jonas smirked. Then draw. The world narrowed to the space between us. The hiss of the fire. The shallow breath of a frightened boy. The weight of the revolver at my side. I drew. The crack split the night, echoing off the frozen ground. Jonas staggered, shock twisting his face before he collapsed into the snow, crimson spilling across the white. His gun never cleared the holster. For a long moment, all I heard was the ringing in my ears. Then Samuel's cry cut through, sharp and frightened. Clara rushed to him, clutching him close, but her eyes found mine over his shoulder. They weren't grateful. They weren't even relieved. They were haunted. I stood there, smoke rising from my barrel, staring down at the man who once called me brother in arms. My chest felt hollow, empty. When it was over, I didn't follow Clara and Samuel back to town. I couldn't. I rode home through the falling snow, back to the house, where Mary's lantern no longer burned in the window. I didn't know if she'd ever let me in again. I didn't know if Samuel would ever learn the truth. All I knew was that the past doesn't die easy in the West. It lingers like a scar, like the echo of gunfire in the cold night. And some reckonings cost more than a man can bear.